Toomey.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for joining us. Excuse me. I wanted to follow up on a concern raised by Senator Sessions about the IMF reforms. I understand the administration wants to get this done. I share his view. Frankly, I would like us to move forward on a well-crafted package of aid for Ukraine. I think that makes a lot of sense. I am concerned that this unnecessarily complicates it, so I want to make sure that I'm clear about this. It's my understanding that the reforms are not actually necessary for the IMF to proceed with the $15 billion loan package that's under consideration. And while that amount is far in excess of the normal limit that would apply for Ukraine's quota, the IMF has a framework in place for those kinds of circumstances, the exceptional access framework. It's been used in the past. It could be used again. So am I correct in understanding that it's not actually essential to complete that $15 billion package to have the reforms adopted by the United States?
Senator, there is a distinction between the flexible window, which would go from $1 billion to $1.6 billion, and the extraordinary package. Right. And the extraordinary package is not governed by quota share. Right. What is very much the case is that our voice in the IMF is affected by whether or not we approve quota reform, and our ability to drive that package in the direction that we think it needs to go is diminished if we don't act on it. And one point I should make is, in terms of the complication, we're working very closely with the government of Ukraine. I've talked to the Prime Minister a number of times. I'll be meeting with him today and tomorrow. Ukraine has sufficient cash for the immediate future. Their need is not today or tomorrow. It's in Ukraine's interest that we get this right. And if we do the three-part package that's being developed in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, that will be the best way to help Ukraine.
Okay, and you confirmed, I mean, you'd like to have it, I understand that, and you believe it enhances our ability to influence the composition of the package. I get that, but it's not actually technical.
Yeah, Senator, I have conversations with my counterparts every day, foreign ministers from other countries. I'm in one part of the conversation urging them to do what we want, and in the other part of the conversation answering, when are you finally going to do the quota reforms? We need to not be on the defense. We need to be the strongest country in the world.
The other thing that's just a little peculiar about the reforms is seems to me an unfortunate timing in some respects, since this is in response to the outrageous behavior of the Russian government to some degree, and yet the reforms actually diminish American voting power and increase Russia's voting power. So it sort of looks like it sends a bit of a mixed signal. But I wanted to raise another issue, and that is the government's role with Fannie and Freddie. As you know, when the government stepped in and bailed out Fannie and Freddie, the government signed a very specific agreement with the Board of Directors, which they entered into voluntarily. It involves the government providing guarantees and a line of credit and a very specific return, right? That the government would get a 10% return on money extended and options to purchase 79.9% of the equity. In August of 2012, just as it was becoming apparent that Fannie and Freddie were going to return to significant profitability, the government came along and negotiated a new deal with itself. With the Treasury Secretary on one side and a government-appointed regulator on the other side, they wrote a new agreement whereby the government now gets 100% of the profits when the previous agreement stipulated that they would have ownership of just under 80%. Isn't this a serious breach of the sanctity of contracts, and doesn't this undermine our commitment to the rule of law to have done this?
Senator, you know, we have had a very clear policy on Fannie and Freddie, which is that we're winding them down, and that's why it's so important that we're making progress on a bipartisan basis to work on housing finance reform. I think that when you look at the agreements that were made for the federal government to step in and become a conservator, and the subsequent agreements that were made, it serves the public interest, and the sooner we get on with the debate of housing finance reform, the better. We've sent clear signals of what our policy intent was, so no one was not warned of what the goal was. And you know, I think the damage done to our economy because of the failures of Fannie and Freddie were deep, And I think that the policies in place are right. If I could just respond, though, on the point you made about Russia, just a technical matter.
I'd like a quick follow-up on the Fannie and Freddie question, but go ahead.
As a just factual matter, Russia's share goes up a trivial 0.2%, from 2.4 to 2.6. The important thing about the 2010 agreement is the United States maintains its veto authority, and the reallocation of shares did not reduce the U.S. influence in the IMF, which is why it's so important that we get it done.
Well, I'm happy to have that conversation. I just think it'd be better to do it on a different vehicle. And just a final word on Fannie and Freddie. Whatever policies have been signaled, and I am one that believes we absolutely cannot go back to the status quo ante. I think that was a very bad model that we had. I've criticized it in the past. I certainly don't want to return to that. And by the way, I'll be the first to acknowledge the taxpayers have not yet gotten a return on the money that they've extended. They've gotten back an amount about equal to the principal amount, no return, no interest, none of the 10%. So
nothing close to the damage to their economy.
By no means has that occurred. But whatever signals you've sent about policy cannot be more important than a contract that's been signed. And when American people, and that includes savers, investors, pension funds, community banks all across the country, can't have confidence in a contract that they have with the United States government, I think that has a chilling effect on our economy as well, and our ability to attract the private capital to reform Fannie and Freddie. So I'm very concerned about that. Thank you, Madam Chairman, for the indulgence.